Welcome to the latest installment of Brand of Brothers. I'm Doug.
And I'm Johnny. Today we're introducing the Higgins-Berger Scale of AI ethics.
All right, let's get to it.
And we're back. So last time, Doug, we were talking about ethics in generative AI use, specifically in the creative agency space. It really applies to anyone, a business owner, a CMO, anybody who works in a marketing department, like really needs
agency,
agency, even boards of directors, right? So,
I think that it has numerous applications, but we primarily created it with agencies in mind and graphic designers in mind that have questions about when it is ethically appropriate to utilize generative AI.
So we built this scale. Yeah, I like that you named it the Higgins-Berger Scale, the HBS.
It is the HBS. And why did we name it that?
You named it after the God particle.
That's right, the Higgs boson particle.
Yes. There's actually an AI startup called Higgs Field, which is the where the Higgs particles live. I don't even know what the Higgs field is, but it has something to do with the Higgs boson. But that's for a different podcast.
Yes, it is. And probably not Brand of Brothers.
Not Brand of Brothers. So we put together this framework. I took the first stab, and we've gone back and forth. We even roped in a buddy of ours that works in a totally different field, and got some input from him.
Mm-hmm.
And after iterating on a few times, we did the first draft, and then we did realize that we needed to address some other things. We talked about what to include in our scale
and what to exclude.
For example, we made a conscious decision to not include like environmental impacts, right?
Right. Yeah. Listen, we know that there will always be ethical conundrums. If we let certain ethics prevent us from progress, then and I should be specific. Like it obviously we don't want the environment to be destroyed, but we also understand that industry tends to degrade environment, and then there are course corrections, and hopefully we're witnessing that as we move forward. And plus, the computing power and everything becomes more economical as time goes on, but at the scale at which it's working, there is significant economic or environmental impact.
Right.
So,
and just not to gloss over that, because I'd like to I get a lot of questions because other people see me as a computer guy.
Is it the glasses?
It's probably the glasses and all of the posts I make about computer stuff.
Yeah.
So the people ask about this environmental impact, which has made a lot of noise and news, both of those.
Yes.
But a lot of them, okay, there's two separate things. There's the training data, which does require a tremendous amount of power, training these models.
Mm-hmm.
But when you think of it in terms of the equivalent power of what it costs Amazon to run Amazon's website, or all of the hosting that Microsoft Azure does, it is a piece of the overall IT infrastructure that runs the world these days.
And then we have to delve into parts like, well, Amazon, for example, is investing in like planting forests, right? As a way to kind of offset their carbon footprint. So, does that make it ethically okay to do what they're doing? So should we bother going down this rabbit hole?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think what's important are really the 5 categories that we landed on, with, in my personal opinion, with the human in the loop being the most important.
Sure.
However, there's intent and so on, that, can get nefarious pretty quickly. But people who are acting, as I mentioned in our previous episode, who are acting maliciously, they don't care about the ethics.
Right. So while we do have a red zone in our scale, where that red is defined as, ethically dubious, likely scam, you're breaking laws and hurting people.
Right.
Intentionally, right?
Yeah.
So, but those people aren't going to use this scale.
So really quickly, if we can dive into the 5 categories of the scale,
okay,
and the 5 potential outcomes. So, do you want me to dive in?
Yeah, let's hear
okay.
it. Let's hear it.
So I created a ridiculous acronym to help us remember.
Oh, I'm ready to hear this one. What is
okay.
it?
So, all right. Forgive me. I'm putting myself on the spot. So it is Doug and Diggz intend to party.
Doug and Diggz intend to party. So it's DDITP?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the first D is yeah. So
the first D
is data use.
Okay. So this is
so it's data use and privacy.
Okay.
And so this is about the ethical sourcing of data and also, not violating people's privacy. It delves into that, right?
Okay.
So then the second D is displacement. And it's specifically about displacement of humans. And so this is, are we replacing a person with AI, or are we augmenting their abilities with AI? So obviously, if we're augmenting their abilities with AI, that's going to be a lower score, which is good. And if it's displacing a person intentionally, then that's bad. So speaking of intentional, that takes us to intent.
Intend to party.
And so with regard to intent, are we intending to inform and educate, or are we intending to mislead and dupe, right?
Intent was one that we sort of added, I think, after we did the initial 4. I think that was one, if I remember the evolution.
You're asking me to remember something. I don't even know what I have for lunch
I think
today.
intent really was something, because I think it's important, and people don't really think about it too much. Are you intentionally deceiving people? Are you intentionally trying to do good? Like, if you're using AI and you maybe it's not to generate a flyer for your yard sale, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And the AI was maybe you're using one that wasn't ethically sourced data. Maybe that it prints it out in fonts that aren't licensed. And maybe it uses an image that looks like your neighbor, So, but your intent is just to advertise your garage sale. So that should factor in. It wasn't like you're trying to out there to deceive people, or you didn't intend to include your neighbor's picture.
It's not like you're having a yard sale that, let's say you're just selling old clothes and knickknacks.
Right.
It's not like you're putting diamonds and jewels and family heirlooms on the market. So I think it's a genuine effort that, yes, it's displacing a person. Is it bad? It's not great, but you're making a neighborhood flyer. Does that really require a professional's involvement?
Right. Now, and also there's a level of accountability there too, right? So if you can just say AI made this, and it removes your accountability.
Well, I think now you're getting into transparency, right? So there's the D, we already talked about those two, and then the I, and now we're on to the T, which is the transparency. And so that's about disclosure. And
it's not a D.
I mean, if you want to get there, you can. It's really comes down to whether or whether or not you're telling people that you used AI to create what you're doing, which in many instances is not really important. There are people that believe that you need to just be, hammer it home all the time, anytime you're using AI.
Radical disclosure.
Right.
Yeah.
But the reality is that you don't have to tell people what tools you used to build the building.
And I would imagine that you don't disclose that when you make a design for a client, you don't say we used Illustrator or we used, you don't go through the process.
Excuse me.
You typically just hand them the end results. And
right.
So if AI is a tool in your
it's just like using InDesign or Illustrator or
right.
Photoshop.
And many times it is actually using Photoshop.
Right.
Because the AI tool is inside of Photoshop.
Right. So that takes us through transparency. And so then the last category is potential for harm. So before we go into potential for harm, let's go ahead and recap really quickly. So Doug and Diggz intend to party. So that is data use, right?
Yep.
That is, help me out here. We're going to skip intent, transparency, and displacement. So then that then takes us to potential for harm.
And why would somebody use AI nefariously, Doug?
So it's ordinarily probably to mislead, misrepresent, and then to take money. And we've seen it personally, we've seen it allegorically, where it is possible to pretend to be a something that you are not, and you can utilize AI to do this incredibly well.
So I found an interesting use case that I hadn't considered, because there's a lot of talk about deep fakes, and this falls in clearly into the potential for harm.
Mm-hmm.
And what the threat that I had understood was that someone's going to use a deep fake to pretend that they're the president, and something's going to go viral where the president
mm-hmm.
said something that he didn't actually say.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to cause, and it could cause conflict. We've seen cases of this happening. Mm-hmm. We've even seen our president share some of this AI generated stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But that is one type of potential threat with AI. Another one that I saw recently that I didn't see coming was taking YouTube personalities. These are people who post regularly, and sometimes they're political podcasters and talking, influencers, if you will.
Yep.
And so nefarious people are using AI to regenerate content that looks like them,
sure,
sounds like them, is talking about the same things as them. And right now, these fake AI personalities aren't really conflicting with what the podcaster says. They're actually mirroring it. But what they're doing is diluting that person's ability to make money and be trusted, because all these fake versions of them are popping up. And it would be very easy for whoever was doing this to slightly switch the messaging and tweak it into a different direction that either alienates their audience or attracts a new kind of audience that they don't want.
I mean, I think it's safe to say that that's already coming.
Yeah,
right.
It's happening.
It's happening.
Yeah.
And so it's a complicated area. Obviously, providers that make this possible should probably begin to figure out how to prevent these situations from happening.
Yeah.
We already experienced,
but you can install a lot of these models locally, and there's nothing.
The guardrails are gone.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But yeah, so at the end of the day, we have this Higgins-Berger scale, which helps us ascertain where we are on an ethical level. And so that scale is on a 0 to 10 plus level, right? So 0 is blue. Blue means that everything that you're doing from an ethical perspective is flawless, right? it is immaculate.
Beyond reproach.
It's true. And when you use the HBS utility, you'll also notice that a number of the drop downs have these extra components that kind of offset from your responses.
Like a modifier?
Like a modifier.
Okay.
I think exactly
like a modifier. This was also an evolution. We realized that there were some use cases. Well, in this particular, because we had to put this thing through its paces and come up with use cases.
Yeah, like a great modifier would be that, let's say that you're creating an animation utilizing an AI platform, and you upload the first frame and the last frame, and it interpolates the rest and creates that animation. But you don't know where that platform sourced that information, but you own
both frames,
the before and after frames.
Yeah.
So that in and of itself, because you own it or you licensed it, that's a modifier. Sure. So all of a sudden you go from a gray zone of ethical use because you don't know how
Kling or one of those tools.
Right. Yeah. Well, let's careful about who we name.
Yeah. I do want to name them because I don't know, first of all, how Kling gets their data.
Or Sora.
Or Sora or Gemini or, I mean, the only one that I'm pretty sure of is Adobe.
Right.
But the rest of them, there's a little bit of a question mark about where they got the images to train their image models or all the text. I mean, we talked about lawsuits with the New York Times and OpenAI, and so those sort of modifiers help mitigate what could be really it's really recognizing that this is a scale and that there are little steps along the way that can change. Oh, well, if you use an original image that you do have a license to, or a photograph that you took as the starting point, that should count for something.
And the same is true with, mitigating displacement, human displacement, right? And so did you hire a person in this process? That can automatically, bring your score down. And the goal, of course, is to be as close to 0 as possible. So that's in the blue zone for a 0 when you're immaculate. However, then there's the typical operating area, which is green zone. The green zone is completely acceptable. It means that, you're doing your best to make sure that you're not displacing a person. You're doing your best to make sure that you're using clean data. You're making sure that the intent is clear and reasonable. And speaking of being clear, you're transparent about your AI use where necessary, right? Like if you're educating people and you're generating information from OpenAI, for example, and you're not disclosing that there's a potential that there could be flawed information, that's problematic, right? And then there's the human capital component, and then of course the actual party. So when it comes to the scale, we want to make sure that we're in that green zone. However, there are certain answers that begin to tilt the scale in a way where it's important for the individual using the tool to go, okay, based on my responses, we need to make these adjustments in order to be dialed back into the green zone, which is really what it's all about. Any moment in time that a designer or a creative utilizes the tool and goes, oh crap, I just realized that in order to solve this problem, I need to make sure that the person who was doing the execution is now reskilled to do the prompt engineering and learn how to become a creative director, for example, as opposed to the designer that they are today.
Yeah, in audio, that too. You become, instead of in addition to becoming, if you're a musician and you're using these tools to make audio, like Suno or one of those, you're becoming more of a producer, right? You know, you may be still playing instruments to train the AI for the song you want or whatever, but you get back a full arranged composition,
right?
And then it's up to you to sort of deconstruct that, slice it up, and make it more your own. But someone who, for example, uses a tool like Suno or Udio, generates a song, posts it on Spotify with no human interaction. That's the stuff that's literally the definition of slop.
Yep, that's right? Your AI slop, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's easy for me to say. The proliferation of AI slop is so incredible that, frankly, it's benefiting humans and their abilities to be able to pinpoint when something is AI. And you may not consciously be aware of it, but you are subconsciously aware that you're looking at garbage or listening to garbage. And, you know, there's some entertaining stuff out there.
Sure.
Look, I got rung in the other day when I saw something that I found rather entertaining. And then when the video looped, I started noticing that there were these strange aspects that were happening. And I'm like, that was some entertaining slop. But I also took the initiative to make sure that my algorithm knew that I don't want that.
Sure. And I think that you're right. A lot of humans are getting better at recognizing the difference. It's not necessarily conscious, but you know, the telltale signs that were there a year ago of like multiple fingers, and you know, the one that comes to mind is there was an AI video. One of the early AI viral videos was Will Smith eating some spaghetti.
Oh yeah,
right. So they're getting better.
Sure, and
it's probably harder to make something like that Will Smith today because it doesn't want to make it look like that. They add more guardrails. You know, there's a lot of controversy with Grok in recent about being able to, you know, basically deep fake naked pictures of people, you know, uploading clothed people and taking all their clothes off. It really, you know.
And where did it get that data?
Right.
You know, so I think it's pretty clear that, you know, on the ethics scale, that there are AI solutions that are more favorable than others. One of the things that I love about AI, about OpenAI specifically, is I can actually have it iterate from my own content that I've created. And so it'll just focus in on the media that I've originated. So it's repurposing that instead of going out and trying to infuse it with outside resources that don't necessarily apply.
So we were at the yellow zone.
Yeah, and then there's the orange zone and the red zone. Listen, when it comes to the scale, it is a numeric scale, which really simplifies it because you're able to take something that's
arguably oversimplifies it, but yeah.
It's taking a concept and quantifying it,
attempting to quantify it.
And I think it does a really great job because before we quantify it, we qualify it, right? We create these different criteria baked into each one that's then able to assess a numeric value.
So I think we should get into the tool a little bit deeper dive, and maybe save that for next time.
Sure.
And also I'd love to, possibly keep this series going, talking about each of, the Doug and Diggz intend to party
The
categories.
HBS categories.
Yes, the HBS categories, and really going about it. And I love, one of the reasons that we did end up publishing this is because we want feedback, and we want challenges, and we want people to give us pushback on, you didn't think about this, you didn't think about that. And because I envision this as something that can evolve, something that potentially, business owners and board of directors and ethics, and advisors.
And we'll make sure that in the show notes that there is a link to the article about the paper, then a link to the paper itself, and then of course a link to the utility. So all of those will be in the show notes that when we post this.
Sounds good. Until next time, stay ethical.
Thank you for tuning in to Brand of Brothers. Big thank you to our presenting sponsor, Remix, the branding agency, along with production assistance from Johnny Diggz, Simon Jacobson, and me, Doug Berger. We can't forget music by PRO. Speaking of not forgetting, remember to do that like and subscribe thing, and find us at brandshowlive.com and follow us on the socials at Brand Show Live.